Good afternoon. You have joined an info session about Enterprise Community Partners Collaborative Action Grant Program. We'll be starting in just a few minutes. Please mute your lines to minimize background noise. All culture and creativity webinars are recorded and will be sent out early next week. If you have any questions, please type them out in the Q&A section on the right hand of your screen. We will address questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you again for joining us today. My name is Frederick Zindel, and I am a Program Associate on our National Initiatives team here at Enterprise. Our goal today is to introduce our collaborative action grants and hear some examples and stories from past grantees. Joining me today is Nella Young, Senior Program Director at Enterprise, who oversees our culture and creativity programming, and Emily Roush-Elliott from Delta Design Build in Greenwood, Mississippi. She did one of the first collaborative actions that Enterprise sponsored and is going to moderate a discussion with 3 of our 2017 grantees. Here to talk about their experience with their collaborative action they hosted in their cities are Taro Matsuno from Lawrenceville United in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Leah Oxenhandler from People's Emergency Center in Philly, and Helen Slade of Territory NFP in Chicago, Illinois. First, I will start us off with an overview of the Collaborative Actions Grant, the history, and the grant application details before we dig into more discussion. Enterprise's Collaborative Action Grants provide organizations with $5,000 to build community agency, engage local voices, and connect to long-term community goals. You might be asking yourself what a collaborative action is right now. I hope that by their name, collaborative actions are self-explanatory. These are projects that include community collaboration at their core. They are small-scale projects that plant or cultivate a seed of possibility. Because they are small, we have really seen that they provide enough incentive to move an idea into reality, but they also allow for a sense of experimentation and imperfection. Collaborative actions may be permanent or temporary, tangible or intangible, and may include creative placemaking activities like mapping, art installations, or community events. They are typically small-scale, low-cost, and short in duration, but often fit into a larger community effort or address a broader community need. They can fill a gap that there may not otherwise be time or money to invest in. Nella Young will now dive into a brief history of the program.
Thanks, Frederick. So I'm going to take a moment to just share a little bit of the backstory of how the Collaborative Action Grants came to be and try to give a sense of the spirit behind them. So back in 2013 at Enterprise, we were in conversation with an organization called the Fetzer Institute. And we were talking about whether creativity and design could be a force for building love, forgiveness, and compassion in the world. At Enterprise, we have a program called the Enterprise Rose Architectural Fellowship that partners designers and community development nonprofits to figure out how they can better leverage the design process to achieve an organization's mission. So we thought that the fellows would be really great partners in investigating this question about the potential for design as a healing force in communities. So in each of their various communities across the United States, 8 Rose Fellows did something creative in collaboration with their community to increase love, forgiveness, and compassion. And there's just a snapshot from each of the 8 collaborative actions that took place in 2013 and 2014. Some of the examples were a community day that celebrated the unique things that people in the neighborhood were good at. That's the one that Emily organized in partnership with people in Greenwood, Mississippi, and we're going to hear a little bit more from Emily today. There was an origami graffiti installation in Seattle that honored a local social justice hero and marked the site so people knew something was coming soon. And that ended up also really influencing the identity of the future development. There was a community heritage walk which gathered local histories and mapped a future trail that would incorporate local art. So these were just a few of the initial collaborative actions. Many of them seeded much larger development projects and also brought people together in a real spirit of creativity and adventure. So we think that the experience and lessons learned from this first year are still relevant for all those interested in doing a collaborative action in 2018. So a little bit later in the slides, we will share a link to Made with Love, which is a book that is available on our website, and it captures those 8 stories of the initial round of collaborative actions. So as I think Frederick mentioned, in 2018, we're going to be giving 20 of these grants, and over the last couple of years, we've done 35. So we have a real depth of experience now to draw from, and we're going to hear from a few more past grantees today. So this slide with these quotes just captures a few of the ways that the fellows in that first year described their approach. And I wanted to share these because I feel like these kind of get at the core and the spirit of the grant program. So they really felt like they were asking community members to help generate the ideas. They were really listening and bringing those ideas from the community to life. Many of them were things community members had been talking about for years and just never felt like they had the impetus to make something happen. And they also really came with an intention of building the history and the community identity into a project that ultimately is going to be around for a long time. So I'm going to pass it back to Frederick to tell you a little bit more about the details, and then we'll hear from Emily and some grantees to help also describe what some of the things that they've done in the past and give you some inspiration.
Thank you, Nella. So I'm going to go ahead and give a little bit of a grant overview. At Enterprise here, we believe that integrating arts, culture, creativity, and design into community development practice leads to improved outcomes at all levels of a community's well-being. We are working hard to build collective capacity to do this more within Enterprise and our partner organizations. This year, we will be awarding 20 collaborative actions, that is 10 for each round. The award per grantee will be $5,000, and the period of performance will be 6 months from grant notification. While organizations from all over the country are welcome to apply, we do prioritize our target geographies. Our target geographies are listed here as well as on our website and the RFP. Here is an outline of our selection criteria and how proposals will be evaluated. We will be asking for a project description, community context and engagement, communications and outreach plans, and how the collaborative action will impact the community. Proposals will be evaluated on how well they advance long-term community goals, excuse me, deploy creative and collaborative strategies, engage local voices and build community agency, and demonstrate feasibility within the budget and timeline. We are offering 2 rounds this year in 2018. Applicants should be prepared to complete the collaborative action within 6 months of the grant notification. Right now, our proposal is open. It was released on January 31st with a submission deadline of March 9th. Grantees in round 1 will be notified the week of March 30th. Anyone from round 1 is welcome to apply to round 2 if they do not get awarded. And round 2's proposal will be released March 12th with a submission deadline of April 30th. I also want to point out some useful inspiration, tools, and resources that you may find helpful as you develop your proposals. First, there are some links in the sidebar of the RFP that guide you to more information and project examples. We also have our Made with Love books that Nella talked about earlier that shares 8 case studies of the initial collaborative actions in 2013 and 2014. They are not only great examples, but include some good advice based on a few difficult lessons learned. They are also a good model for the kinds of impacts these types of projects can have, both small and large in scale. It is available online, and you can also order a printed copy. Just follow the link. Last year's Collaborative Action grantees created community how-to guides that you can also see online for further inspiration.
Great, thanks, Frederick. So I'm going to now introduce Emily Roush-Elliott. She is a social impact architect and co-founder of Delta Design Build, a mission-driven design build firm that focuses on architecture, design, construction, and skill development in the partner communities where they work. Emily is a licensed architect who has worked in Tanzania and in the US. And as we mentioned before, from 2013 to 2015, she was an Enterprise Rose Architectural Fellow in Mississippi, hosted by the Greenwood Economic Development Corporation and the Carl Smalltown Center at Mississippi State University. So Emily was part of the group of 8 collaborative action projects, and her collaborative action was Good at Day, which was an event that really celebrated the unrecognized talents and contributions that everyone could bring to their community. And she has been getting to know a number of our grantees and having conversation with them. So she's going to lead off a little panel discussion with the 3 former grantees that we have invited here today. So welcome, Emily.
Thank you, Nella. It's always a pleasure to be involved in collaborative action webinars and thinking in general. I think as important as we think this work is, it's all spread over the country. It's rare that we get to put our minds together and spend some time thinking and talking about it. So I'm really happy to be here. And I'm here today with three of our 2017 grantees. We have Taro Matsuno from Lawrenceville United, Helen Slade from Territory NSP, and Leah Oxenhandler from the People's Emergency Center, as Frederick said earlier. So we're going to have about a 20-minute conversation, and we're going to talk through some things. I think as Frederick said early on the call, you may be wondering even what we mean by some of the terms we say. What is a collaborative action? And so I hope that you feel a little more enlightened about that as we have this conversation. But then after about 20 minutes of us talking, we're going to open it up to get some questions from you all. I already see a few below, and I'll be keeping an eye on those throughout our conversation. If there's something that's pertinent to what we're talking about sort of immediately, we might switch right to that question, or we might just save them for the end. We'll sort of see how it goes. So I did see one question came in right away, and it was that someone had joined a little bit late. This is, of course, going to be available within a couple of days. If you registered for the webinar, you'll get an email linking you to the presentation and the recording. So just to give people a sense of what each of our guests on the call today did, Taro, will you start us out with just a quick summary, about a minute or two, of your collaborative action?
Sure. So our collaborative action was around this project we've been working on for a couple of years called Duncan Park. Duncan Park is a decommissioned City of Pittsburgh park, And we've been working to create an edible fruit tree orchard there and to bring back play spaces for neighborhood kids. So Lawrenceville is a neighborhood in transition, so the focus of the project was to really build connections between families and children that live around this site and young gardeners who've been doing greening work all over. So what we did was we created a sensory garden. We ran a series of kids gardening workshops, and we're working on bringing play equipment to the site as well.
Great. Helen, will you do the same, please?
Sure. Hi. First off, Territory is an urban design program for young people to lead through the practice of design in their own communities. The collaborative action that we did kind of started a couple of years ago, like Taro's, with a series of design team projects where the young people said, hey, what we really need in this neighborhood is more places for people to gather and socialize. And over the course of a couple of terms, they developed a proposal for a people spot, which is a Chicago Department of Transportation sitting area. And they went through the design process. And our actual collaborative action grant, I think, started right in the middle of that design process when we realized we were going to have the opportunity to do what we're calling a slow motion barn raising that was actually kind of a construction process for the people spot that was led by the young people on our design team.
Wonderful. And Leah, will you give us your 1-minute summary of your collaborative action?
Sure. So my organization, People's Emergency Center in West Philadelphia, owns a very highly visible and important site that's at the intersection of a lot of new development, big universities, and it's also a spot where low-income neighborhoods overlap with more affluent neighborhoods, and also is right at the beginning of the Lancaster Avenue historic commercial corridor that kind of works its way down into West Philadelphia, where my organization works. So this building was previously a bank with a large parking lot on the site, and we decided to take the site that was previously we were using it as a community space inside the building, but we decided to make the programming that we were holding at the building as sort of a transitional use while we worked on and we continue to work on a longer-term development plan for the project into this visible public gathering space to reclaim it as a place where people in the neighborhood could go and mix and sort of as this gateway to the neighborhoods where we work. So we worked for throughout the spring and summer of 2017 on collaboratively doing very large community cleanup, gardening, and painting days. And we did an entire block-wide mural on the sidewalk around the site. So it makes it very hard to miss what's going on in the building, and the space then was used throughout the rest of the summer and the fall for different types of programming, and will continue to be used this year until something more permanent happens on the site.
Great, thanks Leah. And for anyone who's looking at their webinar screen as well as listening in today, you can see the colorful and beautiful space that resulted from Leah's collaborative action. So there are a lot of grants out there that maybe aren't quite so clear, I think, in their title of what the hope is. And the collaborative action grant makes it very clear. There's the goal that there will be collaboration and that there will be some action. So as people collaborate, they're working within and as a part of a community. Just to start us off, an address to each of you, how is your community defined? Is it geographic, demographic, or experiential? And how did you know what collaborative action was needed in this specific community? Maybe Helen, will you start us off on that one?
Sure. Well, we define our community sort of based on where the young people who are a part of our team live and go to school. So we're currently working in the neighborhood of Albany Park on this project, and all of the young people on the team live or go to school in this neighborhood. We asked them, really, they did the research. They started out by talking to people who lived in the neighborhood to see what people felt was missing or needed. And then they came back and said, you know, what we need really more than anything else is a place where young people can hang out and gather safely. And so that kind of became the mission for this project. So the collaboration then involved working with neighborhood organizations, both civic organizations and kind of economic development organizations, and also with other youth organizations to continue getting feedback and to get the funding and really the civic support that we needed in order to build the project.
Nice. Leah or Taro, do you want to jump in on this question?
I think I touched on it a little bit. This is Leah. I think our site is really interesting because our community is defined a little bit geographically, but also by the users who, you know, come to the universities and live in the neighborhoods that, you know, that are in our service area. So the collaborative action was really an interesting time for us to involve students in the area that wouldn't typically mix with longtime neighborhood residents. And then we were also using a longer-term neighborhood planning process in order to define the use for the site. So we were holding community meetings earlier in the year that allowed us to kind of gather feedback on how neighbors wanted the site to be used. So a lot of the information gathered through that process was really informed the fact that we were sort of trying out this public gathering space, parklet idea on this site, and thinking about how different people in the neighborhood would end up using it. So this sort of ended up as a test case for us to consider how the site should develop in the future based on the community feedback, you know, the ways that different people have interacted at the site throughout, you know, the summer and fall once we started really using it. And then we'll continue to kind of observe and see how different events go on the site this coming summer.
Yeah, I think for our, I think that our neighborhood has maybe some similar dynamics, especially to Leah, what you had mentioned. Pittsburgh has come up in the news a little bit, and we've seen our neighborhood, Lawrenceville, come up on like coolest neighborhood in America lists and that kind of thing. And so like if you look, you know, if you look in our main commercial drag, you'll see a lot of like restaurants and bars and like quirky shops and that sort of thing. And I think that's what people usually think of when they hear of Lawrenceville. You know, but I think that isn't quite the community that we're really interested in serving. You know, we see that like people think that Lawrenceville's done, that like there's nothing left to do, it's all revitalized and great, but there have been a lot of people who've been left out of that revitalization and haven't been benefited by it. You know, like Lawrenceville is traditionally a working class neighborhood. It's older than the city as a whole. It's about 15% African American. There's an LGBTQ community that's pretty active. And it's also been really family centric. So with this project in particular, we've been really trying to address the needs of families and ways that they can stay in the neighborhood, because they've been, in our experience, most vulnerable to the displacement that's been happening. So that's sort of where we, the perspective we take when we think about who we're serving and who's part of our community.
Each of you mentioned different ways that you are engaging with your communities, and I think that engagement is something so many people are doing, and if there are best practices in engagement, and there are pitfalls to avoid. If we think about Made with Love, the book from the year that I was a collaborative action grantee that Nella and Frederick referenced, there was the idea there that there could be recipes for community engagement. And my question is, what to you is a necessary ingredient for engaging well and in a way that elevates local voices? And as an example, I was thinking back to a conversation that Helen and I had recently about territory NFT people spot, and she said it really takes a long time to build confidence. So if someone asked me that question, my answer would be time. Time is an essential to quality engagement. Leah, what's your key ingredient to good engagement?
I think that we really try to engage different community members throughout all of these build days that we had. We really wanted to make sure that the community felt like they had invested time and energy in the project, so that the project wouldn't feel like something that we had just created and just kind of had it built out on our own. We wanted there to be sort of a grassroots feel to how this evolved. And I think some of the really public nature of the work was helpful in engaging people who wouldn't normally have been, included in like other ways that we would have, reached out to volunteers. We were outside for like full days in order to capture sort of the full spectrum of foot traffic. We would see, parents walking their kids home. We would see like students going to class in the morning. We would see, like all the crossing guards during the day, and like the surgical residents turning over from the hospital around the corner. So we really tried to make what we were doing really, really visible. So we would like play music on the site and put out chalkboards that like explained what we were doing, and we would get people kind of coming back either the next day or the next painting day or the next volunteer day to help us, and we had people come back repeatedly. So I thought that was an interesting way to kind of just like show sort of the openness of what we were doing and understand how to gather those participants in sort of a different way than we might typically engage them. And I think it was fairly successful in getting a pretty diverse group of volunteers from the different neighborhoods and the different types of, the different sort of user groups that are coming to the neighborhood.
Nice. Nice. I'm making my own recipe then. Visibility, time. Tara, what would you add to this list?
I think that Leah mentioned something that was also that sort of resonated with me, is like this orientation of asking questions, not just like to find out what people necessarily need, but on how they can be a part of the process. Working with a lot of families, they have different needs, from like just your a young single adult to attend a community meeting. So that's something that we've been working on as we take our project forward, is like really figuring out what are the things that are going to help people come out to meetings, and what are the kinds of meetings that people are interested in participating in, so that we get the best quality feedback. So, is it a matter of providing childcare? Is it about making a little bit more room in the budget for like pizzas and dinner? Like those are kind of the nitty-gritty questions that we're trying to figure out, so that we are even more successful this year.
I like how you said that this year, that this isn't just a one-time thing, that Lawrenceville United and all of you on the call are committed usually to a specific place or group of people. Helen, can you talk to us about how the collaborative action allowed you to do its work that you're already doing a lot of, but the collaborative action, you said, allowed you to do it differently than in your typical project?
Sure. The great thing about this collaborative action for us was that we got a chance to put, well, really the team got a chance to put itself into a kind of leadership role that we weren't initially anticipating. When I say a slow motion barn raising, I'm sure everyone can envision the sort of tradition of, everyone out in the field pushing the barn up, and partially because of a few changes in our schedule, but also because of this collaborative action grant, we were able to put a team of young people in charge of the barn raising, and then they were able to establish a set of kind of quality assurance plans so that they could teach other people how to do what they knew how to do. And the great thing about that was the sort of flipping of roles, because there's a photo there that shows a young person and an adult, and in this case, the young person is training the adult on the radial arm saw, which is kind of a great inversion of, you know, the places of power. So it helps us to sort of really reinforce our message, you know, that youth voice and, you know, is a huge part of what we're trying to achieve.
I think that's so exciting, the idea that the young person training the adult. I think that we have a good question I want to address, and I feel like now's a good moment, asking about if the funded collaborative action can be part of a larger project, and if so, how to frame it. And I think maybe Leah and Tara, I think you both can speak to this, that the work that you did, it was very clear what you were going to do with the $5,000 grant, but then you're also figuring out how it fits into a bigger picture plan or a longer term plan, maybe for the site or for your organization.
Yeah, that's a really good.
Go ahead, Tara.
I'm sorry. Oh,
go ahead.
I just think so. When we were we had already identified this project through like a previous planning process. Like we already knew that this was something that people wanted to work on before we applied for the collaborative action, and it was part of my work plan for 2017. So one of the things that we were really thinking about is how to speak to this collaborative element of the grant, especially. For us, it happened to be that, you know, we had these two goals, like additional green space and food production and like family playscape and programming. And like historically, those had been proceeding on two different tracks, like kind of the gardening folks were interested in the gardening stuff and the parents were very interested in the play stuff, and there wasn't a lot of overlap. So, you know, we thought we could make progress towards both of them in a way that like created a bridge between those groups. And that's sort of where the collaborative element came into play. And I think to a certain extent what Nella was talking about earlier about love and forgiveness too. So I think like if you're thinking about the way that you want to do your, like structure your grant, it's like opportunities like that are hopefully, you know, a good way to sort of think about what you're going to be doing and how you're going to talk about it too.
In our case, at the bank, which we sort of rebranded the site as, ours was part of a much larger grant that was more about arts programming. So there had already been this sort of need identified to make the site a little bit more visible in terms of what was going on inside the building, because a lot of the events have been held inside, and our organization was like just using this as an overflow parking lot. So it sort of, the opportunity of the Collaborative Action Grant gave me the opportunity to reposition the site to my organization as really this gateway and almost like a signage for some of the other programming that we were doing. I don't think the picture, well, I guess you can kind of see the sign at the tip of the triangle site that says the bank. That was, and then, you know, underneath it there's a logo that says Lola 38, which was part of a bigger, a very large grant that we got to support ongoing arts programming at this site from the William Penn Foundation. So this became sort of the physical manifestation of that, and a lot of the furnishings that you see in the bottom picture, like the little kiosks and the benches, were actually already part of some of what had been produced to use on the interior of the site. So we're able to overlap some of the items that had already been like created or made. But then this really took what was being done on the interior and like brought it into the public eye. So it was really clear kind of like what the enterprise spend, what the money was being used for. carved out of the larger grants, but it still like really provided a home for the other work that was being done.
Great, thank you. I think that we often see that the collaborative actions are a piece of something else, and we definitely love it when the action itself then catalyzes more. So someone asked if the collaborative action has to happen within the 6 months, and it does, but say in Leah's case, if all these things that are going to continue happening at the bank, that we hope that happens for years, and we'll be checking in with Leah and excited to hear that. Maybe she'll even join us on the call next year. It'll be the collaborative action 18-month update instead of sort of 6 months later. Tara and Helen, I think also thinking along these lines of things that are still to come, you both had some surprises around timing, permissions, some acknowledgement from your government entities. Helen, can you start us off talking about how your project had to pivot to accommodate surprises?
Sure. Well, as you can imagine, it's a project that needs to be sited on a city lot, actually on a city parking space. So the Chicago Department of Transportation is involved, as is somebody who is going to own the thing that's located in the public right-of-way. So we ran into issues kind of just around the time we were starting to construct the people spot. We thought we were going to be culminating, and we thought that this collaborative action would culminate with a big outdoor event where we took all of these modules that you see in the bottom picture and installed them outside. And sort of over the course of September, we were kind of going back and forth with the city about like whether or not we were going to get a permit in time, and they were waiting on insurance, and insurance was kind of holding up because there was a use agreement clause that required, you know, us to hold harmless and indemnify the city if anyone got shot on the people spot. I mean, there were all of these kind of crazy issues, and as a result, we weren't able to get it put up in time for the season, which ends at the beginning or at the middle of November. So the people spot got put up all the way up indoors in December so that we could test all of the parts and really write the last steps of the plan with the hopes that we'll get all of those permissions in place for the new season, which starts in May of this year.
And Taro, you also had some similar and some very different surprises from the city where you work. I don't hear Taro. Well, we will come back. Maybe he's on mute, or maybe we lost him. Let's go. This is actually my last question, I think. And oh, hi, Taro. We hear you now.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I think I just toggled the mute and it started working for some reason. So yeah, because we were part of a larger project, and so I think if you're working on intending to submit for collaborative action that's a part of a larger project, like we just ran into the issue where because we needed again, it was on city land, and we needed to negotiate a maintenance agreement with the city. You know, so it was that part of the like one specific portion of our project that was not covered in the scope of the collaborative action actually ended up holding up our collaborative action, again, like past the period of the grant and also the period where we can like really do meaningful stuff outside. So just like that stuff takes a little bit longer than you might expect, and that's one of the things we learned. But it's also, I think what you're alluding to, Emily, is like a lot of these projects don't have a great precedent necessarily in the city, like at least for us in Pittsburgh. Like no one's really done like an edible orchard like this, and no one's done it on city land. So like our project through like negotiating this maintenance agreement raised a bunch of issues, and you know, so the city was forced to grapple with like how complicated it can be to negotiate like maintenance responsibilities and liabilities and all those kinds of things in a way that works for us. But like on the other hand, you know, the fact that these projects are somewhat new, somewhat different from you know, things that people have done previously, you know, it did, like, we were recognized by the city for that as well, and you know, doing the Collaborative Action Grant and some of the other work that we did over 2017 opened up the door for more funding. The city came to us and said, like, we really like what you're doing. We're going to give you this award out of the blue for $3,000 to use in 2018. So I think that, like, taking taking a different approach part of the collaborative action can kind of cut both ways, but we are excited and grateful to the city for supporting our project, and we're looking forward to doing exciting things with that money this year.
Great. I think in both of your cases, when we talk about the impact and we talk about the projects, we do often think of physical outcomes. We think of something tangible or constructed that we can point to and say, we completed this. But equally important are these other kinds of outcomes. If the city of Chicago is rethinking some of their policies around, or even just the language around the way they're thinking about policies, and in Pittsburgh, the city's having to think about some projects that haven't been done before, those are also really exciting outcomes. I think that one of my favorite things about collaborative actions is that they range really from permanent and physical to intangible and temporary. And the three of you on this call today, you do have some very, very tangible, very permanent work. I want to say to everyone who's listening that on the March call, we're also going to have some people whose work didn't have such a sort of tangible and physical outcome. I think for example, one of the 2017 projects was all about oral histories in the Cherry Hill neighborhood in Baltimore, and that's equally valuable. So it's not just architectural, it's not just land use projects, but even in the cases of projects that are, like the three that we're talking about today, though on the surface, we can see it as tangible. When we've talked about it, the outcomes that have really mattered to you in the communities where you're working the most that come out are not necessarily the physical. Leah, I think you really have talked a lot about uncovering latent value. Helen, you said enfranchisement is one of your favorite words. Tara, I think the value of people gathering has been the thing that's really come to the forefront of this project. We just have a couple more minutes. I would love if each of you want to just talk about those intangible impacts before we hand it over for questions from everyone listening.
Do you want me to start?
That would be great.
Okay. Well, I think enfranchisement is kind of the underlying value of all of the work that we do, but what kind of, I mean, and we were founded sort of originally because I think people perceive young people in our community as sort of a liability rather than an asset. But kind of like what Leah was saying, I mean, putting young people out on the streets in a position where they have kind of the power and authority, but everyone seeing them there is like hugely empowering for them, and I think that really also takes them by surprise. One of the other things I wanted to say earlier was that whole idea when you're talking about how you engage people. Young people are so much easier to talk to. Carrying a clipboard, they're also so much easier to approach, and they get much better stories. So I think that they discover there's a level of power and authority that they discover that they have inside of themselves that generally isn't recognized in, sort of in the other ways in which they, are a part of the world that they're in. And we really draw on their expertise as residents in the community to sort of kind of, I don't know, to light that little flame, but I think that the bigger sort of result is this recognition that they can be like the agents of civic change in their communities, which is pretty great.
It's really exciting. Taro, you want to?
Yeah, just speaking again to our delays. I remember calling Nella and Frederick in the sort of process of our project where I was like, because of these delays with the city's maintenance agreement, it's not looking likely that we're going to be able to put in the playscape equipment. And I think that they sort of really encouraged me to think about these other impacts and these intangible things. And I think that framing it that way was really helpful. Because there were things that came out of this project that aren't a built thing, but but rather than being disappointed at that not happening, like we actually got a lot of great outcomes. Like we did engage a bunch of people through the gardening workshops, and more people started coming out to the site like week after week. So, you know, that got a lot of people more invested in the site and curious about what's been going on. And then like we saw a group of families too form their own play groups. So they meet every Thursday at the site now. Probably not these days, but like when weather is warm, they'll be out there playing Foursquare. So, you know, I think that in retrospect, that gathering element was really like the core of the project, and all of the built stuff is meant to like help achieve that. But we can also do that through like programming and organizing and talking to neighbors. So, so that's sort of one of the really great things that I think came out of our project.
I thought one thing that was amazing when I read your report was that you had a lot of events and you had your attendance from each of those activities, and the things that were sort of more playful and party-ish had good attendance, but the activities that had the best attendance were work days. Like people wanted to show up and work. So that was cool. Mm-hmm. Leah, what do you have to say on this topic to really wrap us up and send us to questions?
Okay. I think that, you know, in terms of latent value, this project really showed the community that this site still existed. I talked to some people at Lowe's when I was buying paint for one of our painting days, because I would sometimes have to stand at Lowe's for like 2 hours while they mixed the like 50 cans of colorful sidewalk paint that I was buying. You know, people were asking me what I was up to, and I was showing them the site, and, you know, I just talked to a lot of people who knew the site and kind of told me that they forgot that it even existed, that they would walk by it all the time and just like ignore that whole block because it was so underutilized and just been vacant and kind of abandoned for so long. So I think the real latent value of the project is being able to reclaim the site as a really clearly like denoted location for this community gathering. And similar to the garden project, you know, I've seen, and my colleagues kind of always notice when there's people sitting there, people gathering there, people eat their lunch there. There have been all kinds of other organizations who have asked us to use the site for their programming. So like over the summer there were like community movie nights, there's you know, there's like film screenings there, and DJs want to play there, and there's like all these new things that I mean, we really didn't do much. We just painted the sidewalk and added some picnic tables, but you know, I think that just kind of showing that there is potential on the site and claiming it, like almost putting a stake in the ground, like you can use this area, I think made a huge difference in just showing the community that it's even still there.
Great. Well, thank you so much to all three of you for collaborating and completing actions in collaboration and catalyzing more collaboration and more action. Of course. Looking at the questions, we have one question that's about have other housing projects, affordable housing projects, use collaborative action grants to integrate this type of work into that project? And the answer is absolutely yes. We have a number of those from both, actually I think all 3 years that we've done this now. I specifically think of one of the 2016 grantees. I'm having trouble remembering that name, but certainly we love to see collaborative actions being part of something like a housing project because it is a nice clear way forward for that action to catalyze more work in the future. Do you have anything to add to that, Nella or Frederick, my response?
Yeah, there was, I think is it Raw Artworks? There was a housing project that had an internal, like an interior collaborative action project that basically had a community curated art process for installing artworks inside the building. And we've had a number of projects at various phases of development. So particularly a lot happening in that pre-development phase or during an interim phase when the site is waiting on tax credit financing and the site is vacant or not quite activated yet, and there's been a lot of projects that kind of foreshadow what's coming or engage community in that process. If you want other examples, I think it's really good we have a couple blog posts from last year that you can find on our website that talk about a few examples, and there may be some in there. And the Collaborative Action book, the Made with Love book, has several of those projects. I can think specifically of 3 that were all within the context of a low-income housing tax credit project. And if you want to know more, we can also answer specific questions about what you're thinking of doing. Frederick and I always respond to emails when people feel like they have something in mind and they just want to double check that they're on the right track. We can always hear a little bit more of the specifics and give you some feedback.
Thanks, Nella. I think I would direct the next question to you or Frederick also. I see this Bonzel Hill says, I see that past projects were primarily art-related. Are neighborhood safety projects welcome?
Well, it's very possible to do a neighborhood safety project that includes some sort of creativity or artistic aspect. So definitely there's another question about land use and architecture. I would say definitely you'll see a strong majority of projects that involve art and are related to architecture or land use projects, but that's not necessarily a limiting factor. But it does have to have some spirit of, usually in addition to the collaborative spirit, we get so many applications. We had over 200 applications for the 20 that we selected last year. We are able to see some that have this extra spirit of creativity and really also honor cultural identity, creative expression, and those end up being the ones that rise to the top. So if you can build that into your community safety project, which I know you can, then it would totally be a great fit.
Exactly. I would second what Nella just said in relation to a couple of other questions, one about assessment and regional planning. All work that it would be exciting to see in a collaborative action application, but that has a lot of space for creativity. And it doesn't mean that you have to have professional artists on the team or on staff, just that sort of creative spirit and cultural attention so that it's really very locally based. Let's see. We have a couple of sort of more technical questions. Are panel comments available from rejected proposals? That is not something that we make available. We have some internal comments, but if you apply for this funding and you aren't successful, you can request a phone call. And so we actually end up doing one-on-one phone calls whenever possible with people, and so then we're not sharing those conversations widely. What is the definition of rural? We rely on HUD definitions, so that would be an area that the boundary of that area includes 30,000 people or less. And it is going to be in the United States. I think all of our projects are in the United States or similar or outlying areas.
United States, yeah. Puerto Rico counts, yeah.
Great, thank you. I always have to defer to Nella and Frederick on preference areas. Is New York City a part of a preference area?
Yes, New York City is part of the targeted geography, and the targeted geographies are based on our enterprise's local market offices. and we engage our local market staff in the selection process as well. So if you know people at the New York office at Enterprise, there would be someone from that office on the review committee, and they would also be evaluating within the context of what their priorities are. They would help elevate which groups we would support as well. So it's a both national and geographic specific selection committee.
And you can certainly apply for both rounds. We had a lot of people that applied in the first and the second round last year. I think the biggest limiter is that this funding is not going to be awarded to one organization 2 years in a row. Is that right, Noah?
Yeah, we would love to be able to do that, but given the popularity of this program, we've really tried to focus on giving everybody a chance. And so we have plenty of new applicants every time that we can award, and we hope that those who had a chance to do it previously maybe can find some other funding in their project budgets. We've seen some creative solutions to that. But yeah, we have not had a repeat grantee for this program because we like to be able to give more to more organizations, to give everyone a chance to give this a try, and a lot of the time it kind of proves its value within your organization, and it makes it possible to begin then doing it again using other sources.
And because it is so small, because it's a $5,000 grant, it's both small and large, I think. It's enough to do something with, but not enough to spread it over a number of years or raise the stakes to a building that becomes a home or something like that. But because it is a relatively small grant, there are limitations on how much we want to see as overhead out of that $5,000. So something like insurance or just sort of straight admin, I think that we're looking at 10% or less is the goal.
We usually actually don't, we ask not to charge overhead on it. We usually just do direct project costs, direct project costs.
Right. So we did have one question specifically about insurance, and I think that unless it was a direct project cost, I would avoid charging that to a $5,000 grant if possible. We have a couple more questions about location. So again, if a rural area is going to be a population of 30,000 or less, so anywhere that fits that category is going to be considered under the rural category. We have a question, is Moncks Corner, South Carolina considered the Southeast market?
I don't know that I can answer these level of detail off the top of my head. So maybe that's an email that you could send to me and Frederick, and we can make sure that we answer it accurately.
Great. I think that brings us, go ahead.
I was going to say, same with the Wisconsin question. You can email that directly, and we can answer some of those questions just to make sure that we are clear.
All right, I have that we have 3 minutes left, and I think we've responded, if not directly, hopefully indirectly, to all of our questions.
Great. So I will close us out, and I will say we are, as we mentioned, Frederick and I are totally happy to respond to questions. So if you feel like there was a level of detail we were not able to get to here, we're totally happy to respond by email. And if it gets complicated, we can have a call. And I want to just take a moment to thank Frederick and Emily and our panelists for this illuminating discussion. I think it really is so much more helpful to hear from you, those of you who've had experience doing these grants, than it is for us to just talk about the concept. So really appreciate that. And for those of you applying to the grant, we can't wait to see your project proposals, and definitely check out our website and RFP and a lot of the tools and resources that we mentioned, and feel free to reach out to us for any other questions that you have. And thanks everyone, and have a great afternoon.